Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Go check them out on Facebook with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. And also MyBookie.ag. Go to thegruelingtruth.net. Click on the MyBookie.ag banner at the top of the page, and it will give you a $1,000 cash back bonus, 50% on whatever you deposit on your first deposit. So if you deposit $2,000, you'll have $3,000 in your account. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. And right now I want to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good. Hey, what's up, everybody? Yeah, I'm not going to do the good evening thing, but hey, thanks for joining us every week. Hey, we appreciate it every time you tune in, so let's get this ball rolling, man.
Well, let's roll this ball out. And last night we had a fair amount of news. Tonight we have no news. We're just going to face it. We're just going to tell the truth. There's no news. So, yeah. Cash Ali bit somebody. Deontay Wilder, Joshua, and Fury are all scared to death to fight each other.
Yeah, Malinagi's out in the gym slapping people. And
yeah. Well, that's what you would call a bitch slap, since he punches like a 12-year-old girl. So we thought something that may be interesting to look at today is the 140-pound division. Even though it's a bastard division that doesn't belong, that was made up. So we thought we would look at who we thought were the greatest 140-pounders of all time. And when I look at this, Jeremiah, it's kind of small on what we have here to pick from. I think anytime you have a division, and I really like Ricky Hatton, but anytime you have a division with Ricky Hatton as one of the 10 greatest of all time, I would say the division probably doesn't have the greatest history.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, obviously I was a big Ricky Hatton guy, but it's just, it's one of those things. I mean, when you comb through Ricky Hatton's resume and, you know, he beats an older Tszyu, still serviceable Tszyu, a good Tszyu still. And then after that, it's, you know, it's guys like who we talked about,
Masa.
Yeah, Masa, Malinaji. Who else did he have? I think he had
Juan Urango.
Juan Urango. I think he had Juan Lascano too, if I'm not mistaken.
Jose Luis Castillo.
Right. Yeah, and obviously Castillo at that point was past his best, but Castillo was the number one guy at that time. So that kind of just shows you how it's just kind of been a kind of like a flyover division. You know, it's not really been one of those that a lot of guys have wanted to plant their stake in and carve out a legacy. But you get every once in a while, you get those guys who are just, you know, into it. Maybe they're just more comfortable doing that. And yeah, it's just not really a long list of greats unless, and I do mean unless you want to count a long time ago. And I'm talking about the 30s and whatnot, when the title was considered synthetic and nobody really cared much about it. But you did have some great fighters fight for it.
Yeah, Jack Kidberg, guys like that, Barney Ross.
Yeah, Tony Canzaneri, Billy Patrol. Or maybe it's Billy Patroli. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. But Billy Patrol, he fought at 140 pounds quite a bit. So, yeah, there. Again, the title was looked at as synthetic, and people didn't really take it too seriously. I think it was only recognized in New Jersey, maybe. I can't quite remember. Maybe it was New York. I don't know. But, yeah, no, it wasn't considered serious. That's why it pretty much went off the map for a little while. And then Tippy Larkin kind of picked up the line, and then it went dead until, 1956. But really because you even had Carlos Ortiz fight for it. So that was kind of the revival of the class. And then you had, you know, a number of rock-solid guys who ended up competing there, you know, like Nicolino Locci. And then that kind of ushered in the Antonio Cervantes period. And, you know, then we know what happened after that, right? It was Pryor, and then it was...
Well, the biggest problem I see, especially with rating these guys, is there's not too many of them that fought a lot of great competition because the division's never really had any depth.
Yeah.
I mean, the big thing that kills Ricky Hatton to me is the fact that I thought he was a much better fighter at 140 than 147. And Floyd Mayweather skipped that division and brought him up to 147. I'm not saying that Ricky Hatton would have beat Floyd Mayweather at 140, but I think it would have been a lot more competitive fight, especially if you had a different referee, too.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder actually what Ricky Hatton would have done if he would have fought in an 8 division setup. Like could he have lost 5 extra pounds and gone down to lightweight?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I think he's one of those guys that kind of would have had to fight at 140 either way, and he'd had to been a welterweight.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know his. He had some. He didn't really have dedication issues, but he just liked to get fat in between fights. So I don't know if that affected things. I don't know. I think about that sometimes. Like I thought about it. I think I even mentioned it. No, I don't think I mentioned it in an article. Yeah, I did. I didn't mention it in an article when I talked about too many weight classes, and where a guy like Antonio Cervantes would have went if he had to pick and choose. Where would Ricky Hatton if he would have had to go to 147? He's certainly not making much of a mark if that's the case. A lot of these guys, yeah. Wilfred Benitez fought down there briefly.
Yeah, and Nicolino Lochi is one that's interesting to me because when he was there, he fought a draw against who you already spoke about, Carlos Ortiz, against Antonio Cervantes, who I think is in everybody's top 5. He won basically all 15 rounds and made Cervantes look foolish. Now, I think Cervantes' prime's probably more like 74 or 77. But let's see, who did he lose his belt to? Did he lose it like Peppermint Frazier?
Yeah, it was somebody like that. Damn, who was it? I mean, I've seen everything Lochi's been in, but I
thought it was Alfonso Frazier, but I'm not 100% sure because we are completely unprepared for this show, just so y'all know.
Yeah, no, we just freestyle. Hey, man, it's like, I said on one of these other shows, I was like, it's hard enough to be an expert on one guy, and it's even more difficult to be an expert on a lot of these guys. But I did watch everything Lochi was in, so yeah, Alfonso Frazier is the man he lost his title to.
Okay, wasn't he the one they called Peppermint?
That's the same guy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sometimes you're just too young for this show. All right.
Yeah, I know. But to that point though, I did see that fight as well, and I think, damn it, who is it? I think Ray Arcel was training Alfonso Frazier for that fight, and if I'm wrong, again, go ahead and correct me.
Yeah, I think he didn't train. I think he trained him for a while, actually.
Yeah. So he trained Frazier for that fight, and he had a specific strategy, which you could see clearly play out in that fight, where he said, don't follow Lochi to the ropes. As soon as he backs up, just go back to the center of the ring and throw punches, just outwork the guy. And it worked to a T. I mean, you could see that Lochi just was kind of thrown off a bit by the strategy because most guys would just follow him back there and he'd fucking make him miss and, make him look like crap. And Frazier had a damn good strategy in that fight. And funny enough, Ray Arcel actually said that Lochi was the greatest defensive fighter he's ever seen. And, we're talking about a guy who saw – knew Benny Leonard personally, saw Willie Pep, tons of, I think he even trained Roberto Duran for a bit. I mean, this is a guy who saw just about anybody and everybody.
All right. Now, a couple guys I think are interesting just because they weren't there very long. Number one would be Wilfred Benitez. And the thing about Wilfred Benitez is he beat Antonio Cervantes, and I think that was, 77, right around there. So he was 17 years old, and Cervantes, I think, was probably still at the back part of his prime because I think he went on to win, or get like 5 or 6 world title wins after that fight. I think Benitez defended like 2 or 3 times, and he immediately moved up to welterweight. But Wilfred Benitez was a great fighter, and he's a guy that I think if he would have stayed at 140, probably would have reigned for the next decade.
Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that because the scorecards were bullshit for that fight. I remember watching that fight.
Yeah, didn't they score it like a split decision or a really close unanimous?
No, it was a split decision. And somehow, I think, what was it? One of the judges, again, we're working on memory here, okay? I think it was, 147, 145 or something like that. They had it really close.
They scored almost everything even.
It was nonsense. I watched that fight and I thought Benitez clearly won. I mean, I'm not.
Wasn't that fight in San Juan?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And that was sort of the oddity of it all. But
yeah.
I remember watching that fight. I didn't even think it was close. I thought Wilfred Benitez clearly won, and that's kind of that actually is one of those things that I always hang over Cervantes' head. Was he was a damn good fighter. It wasn't a great fighter. He was great at 140, but go look at his competition. I mean, again, this is a guy who kind of he made and this is our problem with 140 pounds and a lot of these junior/super divisions anyways, was he was just able to kind of carve out a pretty mediocre legacy.
Well, the best fighters he fought kicked his ass.
Exactly. No, that's what I was going to get to.
It's not like he was competitive even, because he wasn't competitive against Lochi. You've seen that fight, right?
No, they don't have the full 15 rounds. They've got the full second fight available on film, but not the first.
I think I've got the full first fight that I got like 20 years ago. I think it might be silent though.
Oh, well, you might want to put that up on YouTube if that's the case.
But I can't do that anymore. YouTube said I can't do that no more. Even though other people do, I'm not allowed. So I had to take all my stuff down. Another guy that's interesting to me is Meldrick Taylor, because Meldrick Taylor's a guy that was about 2 seconds away from beating what most people would have ranked number 1 or number 2 on this list. And with a different referee, he probably beat a prime in the middle of his prime, Julio Cesar Chavez. And, when you look at that, there's a lot to be said for that. And Taylor was a really talented fighter.
Yeah, and not only that, he beat
Buddy McGirt
at 140 pounds. So that was not a welterweight fight, So people should take note of that. That was for the IBF 140-pound belt.
Yeah, and Buddy McGirt was damn good. And I think Meldrick Taylor also beat Rockin' Robin Blake, who was a guy I've tried to get on this show. I think he's a sheriff in Texas, but he didn't want to talk about boxing anymore. And he also beat Harold Brazier, who, when you look at his record, doesn't look very good. But Harold Brazier went life or death with Roger Mayweather Sr., or whatever the hell he's called. And he was a really good fighter. And I think I remember him beating Cubanito Perez also. So he had a pair of dominant title defenses against John Meekins and somebody I don't remember. But I remember John Wesley Meekins. But this was a guy that I think Chavez pretty much ruined him. But even though he ruined him, Taylor probably won at least 7 out of the 11 rounds.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and you go back to the Brazier fight. Actually, somebody just brought this up, even though I save all these whenever I see him from the ring, when they do the best I've faced. Mickey Ward, I think he spoke real highly of Brazier. And again, it's one of those
good.
Hell yeah, he was. Yeah, like you said, it was one of those. I mean, Ward talked about how crafty he was, how much experience he had, how much savvy he'd had. I mean, yeah, like you said, Brazier was a damn good fighter. Anybody who doubts that, just go watch the film. But yeah, that was
I think Brazier and Mayweather, if it wasn't the fight of the year they fought, was real close to it.
Yeah, you're right. So unfortunately, Meldrick, he got the loss with Chavez. So. It sucks because, again, it's just one of those decisions that had it gone his way, we would think of him a lot differently. And because of the fight, he's not going to last that long afterwards. I don't think he's going to carve out some, big, long reign. But if you had a guy like Brazier, Buddy McGirt, and, Julio Cesar Chavez on your resume, I mean, that really just changes things historically in terms of perception. I mean, I think clearly he's going to be a guy who's much closer to the top 5 at that point, and I would probably rate him in the top 5 if he gets the Chavez win, because I was never really that impressed by a guy like Antonio Cervantes. So head to head there,
I think if Taylor beats Chavez, he's in the top 3. Because if he beats Chavez, I don't know if he was probably ruined anyways, but by that fight, no matter what happened. But the great thing about Harold Brazier actually beat Mickey Ward, I think.
Yeah, he did.
That's what I thought. I think he won like a decision in like the early 90s. Brazier, I think, fought guys like Livingstone, Bramble. He fought just about everybody. And you know who he fought the most? Because Harold Brazier's from Indiana. So he fought Reggie Strickland probably like 10 times. Because I talked to Harold Brazier one time, really nice guy. I was trying to get him on the Legend show. I don't even know why we didn't. Maybe we need to call and try to get him back, especially when we got a night like this when nothing's going on. Because Preisser was a really good fighter. Brazier's a guy that went to England and lost a points decision in Lloyd Hunnigan to Lloyd Hunnigan in like 1983. So the dude was a legit fighter.
Yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, so I mean, Preisser was one of those guys too, and beating Mickey Ward. Ward obviously is not one of those guys that you'd place atop. Even with somebody like Floyd Mayweather, I don't think you can attribute, even though he's probably, you could maybe say that he's the best 140 pounder ever. I'm differentiating between best and greatest because obviously his resume was. What did he have? He beat Arturo Gatti and he beat Henry Bruxelles, and I think
Are you
that's
talking
it.
about Mickey Ward?
No, I'm talking about Floyd Mayweather Jr. at this point.
Okay. Well, Floyd wasn't there long enough, and Floyd did not fight Ricky Hatton, and he should have. And I think that would have settled everything. And I know everybody's out there. He fought Ricky Hatton, but he waited a couple years. He got him up to welterweight, took him into deep water, and drowned him.
Well, you know what should have happened, actually? I mean, besides the point with Mayweather, but it would have been really nice to see Ricky Hatton versus Miguel Cotto at that time because they did fight in the same division for years. And, Hatton obviously became the man at that in that class. And again, Cotto was, defending his WBO trinkets there. And, he beat some solid competition. But again, when you're talking about in terms of greatest, I think it's pretty clear that Hatton is greater than Cotto in that division. Again, whether you want to argue that Cotto was better, I think that's fine. But greater, there's no doubt. I mean, Cotto didn't beat anybody like Tszyu in that division. So I would have loved to have seen that. I think that would have been, if Hatton wins that fight, or whoever wins that fight is really going to come out much better, I think, in the all-time rankings in this division.
All right, so my question is this. When we come to Antonio Cervantes, how do you rank him? Where do you put him? Because most rankings I've ever seen have him in the top 3. And I think there's definitely an argument for it. He did lose to Lochi. He was soundly outpointed, but he came back the following year and beat Peppermint Frazier, who had beat Cervantes. And didn't they fight a second time and he stopped Lochi?
Yeah, so that is correct. I would just say that, after watching everything that Lochi was in, that was an old Lochi. I mean, he was clearly past his best at that point. Even the Frazier fight, Lochi was past his best then. Actually, Lochi was closer to his best when he was fighting guys like, I would just say slightly after the Carlos Ortiz fight. He was probably, in his prime. But yeah, he did end up scoring a stoppage. He didn't knock him out or anything. I think they stopped that because of a cut. I think a punch caused a cut.
I think I've seen the fight before, but it was in Spanish, so I didn't know what was going on. Yeah. The other fight that I saw that was in Spanish with him, though, that was impressive was I thought he was impressive at his decision win over Esteban de Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's probably his best win.
Oh, I think it's by far his best win. The only question there is, did De Jesus lose something coming up from lightweight?
Well, to be honest with you, he looked undersized to me.
He did to me too. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, because I actually watched that fight a few years back too, because I was just kind of interested to see how it played out. And I noticed that De Jesus did some really nice stuff in that fight. He just didn't seem like he could deal with Cervantes' size. I mean, Cervantes, again, even if I wasn't that impressed with him, I can't say that he was a hell of a jabber. I don't think it's one of the all-time great jabs or anything, but he was very consistent with it. He had good size, and he just stuck with it. And
so, how high would you put Cervantes? Would you put him in the top 3, or would you have him lower?
Well, I would probably have him lower.
Me too. I would probably have him.
I might not even have him in the top 5.
Who else would you have in the top 5? Because to me, I think the top 3, and we haven't gone through them yet, and this is in any order, and I think you can be all right, is Chavez, Pryor, and Tszyu. So I think what you've got is, I think, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I think those three with their career are head and shoulders above the rest of this list.
I think, yeah, I'm trying to weigh, some of Cervantes' opponents. Because even when you look at Tszyu and you look at Cervantes, I mean, there's really not a whole lot to differentiate in terms of competition.
Yeah, but I think what I differentiate is this. When I watch them fight, I just think Tszyu looks like he's a lot better.
Yeah, that's why I would rate Tszyu above Cervantes too. And I'm trying to think if even a win over Zab Judah, I think is.
It's a good win. At the time, that was actually a pretty big upset. And to stop him the way he did with one shot, I would say, how about this? Let's do this a different way. Would you rank Cervantes over Ricky Hatton?
I probably would, just because of his longevity.
Would you rank him over Nicolino Loci?
Probably not. I would probably have Loci above him.
Okay. Then I think if you go to the old guys, I think the guy that's obvious here would be Barney Ross.
Yeah, well, and actually, if you look at Jackie Kid Bird's resume
I
too,
think he's up there too. But the thing that stands out to me with Ross is at 140, if I remember right, he's got 2 wins over Tony Canzoneri.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he defended the title twice against Canzoneri, then I don't think you can argue that much. I mean,
yeah, and I mean that's Canzoneri. I think is one of the greatest fighters that ever lived. If you got a top 20 pound for pound list, I think a lot of people would have Canzoneri on that list.
Yeah, or very, very close to it. Well, I think McLaren, Canzoneri, and Ross are all kind of in the same orbit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like you said, it's tough because a lot of these guys didn't take it too seriously and they didn't carve out the legacy. That's why Cervantes kind of had his niche, but still, it's like when I look at Loci, apparently he clowns him for 15 rounds. It makes it really hard.
Yeah.
Because nobody clowned Tszyu. I mean, yeah, he didn't fight.
But how about this? A lot of this stuff isn't about who's greater. It's just matchups a lot of times. And I think that, Loci's style is always going to give Cervantes problems. And that's why you saw right after he loses to Cervantes loses to Peppermint Frazier, but style's not an issue there for Cervantes, where I think the style is actually more in his favor, and he beats Frazier. The same Frazier that had just beaten Loci. And I think Loci probably his last great fight was that first fight against him, but I don't know. That's where I would sit there. And I've watched a lot of Cervantes, and I think he was a really good fighter. And I think that I would put him at 4, though, just because I think Tszyu would beat him. And when you think about it, if you think about the 2 wins against Tony Canzoneri, I think you drop him to 5. And if you think about Nicolino Loci and the way he dominated him, even though I just made the case for him because of styles, I think I'd have Cervantes at 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I mean, again, there's a lot of nitpicking here because of, what transpired. But, I was kind of sifting through Tony Canzoneri's resume, too, to just kind of see what he did. And, I mean, he actually beat Jackie Kid Berg for the title, and he defended successfully against Kid Chocolate. So that those are 2. I actually beat Jack Kid Berg for the title twice, and I've actually seen the 3rd round stoppage, and that was a devastating shot. So I'm putting Canzoneri up there too.
Yeah, I think you put Canzoneri, Berg, and Ross all up there. And I would probably put them all ahead of Tszyu, even though I really like Tszyu, because my problem with Tszyu is, outside of the Zab Judah win, he had the bizarre loss to Vince Phillips. And then it just, his career, from what I remembered, was littered with guys like Juan Laporte, who was old, Sammy Fuentes, who was old, Bramble, who was old. I just don't see a whole lot of stats. I see Rafael Ruelas to me is not a 147. I think the win over Hurtado is good. The Miguel and Hell Gonzalez fight I think is good.
Yeah.
But really, outside of Zab Judah, I don't really see a whole lot there. He beat Chavez, but Chavez was like 70 years old then. Actually, from what I remember, his biggest win was probably Sharmba Mitchell, because I think that was a unification fight, and he whitewashed Octay Urkel, but then he loses, to Ricky Hatton. And Ricky Hatton was a good fighter, and I think wasn't Tszyu like 34, 35, 36, somewhere around there when he fought Hatton?
Yeah, but he was still I remember he was still a good favorite. I remember watching that.
I don't remember anybody saying that he was, done. But when you look at that, I find it really hard to put Costa Tszyu over a guy like Barney Ross or Canzaneri or Berg.
Yeah, just on these. Yeah, I mean, even if the amount of victories is much smaller than, Cervantes or Tszyu, I think you're right. I mean, just the level of competition these guys were fighting, I think adds credence to their position. And it's like Tszyu, I was a huge, Tszyu fan. I really, really liked him. But again, it's like when you're really weighing his competition and you're asking yourself who are the greatest people that he fought. I mean, you're talking about Zab Judah. And, Judah was a good fighter. I mean, he's certainly no Hall of Fame candidate, in my opinion. Actually, when you think about Tszyu in the contemporary sense, I think he's a bottom top 10 guy at welterweight after everything's all said and done. I mean, Joshua Clottey, I think, was better. Cotto was better. Pacquiao, Mayweather, Paul Williams would have beat him. Margarito, I think, would have beat him. So to me, Judah wasn't really he wasn't a great fighter. The Gonzalez fight was good because I think Gonzalez was coming off.
How about this? I think Zab Judah was a guy that was capable of being a great fighter, but mentally he wasn't, and that's what kept him from it.
Yeah, but I think to the Sharmba Mitchell point, because in the first fight, a lot of people I think they had the wrong perception of how that played out. Where the first fight, Sharmba Mitchell was pretty competitive against him, and then he bowed out with an injury. But what I saw, my analysis of the fight was that Tszyu was starting to take over and catch him more and was getting physical with him. And it just looked like it looked to me like the tables were starting to turn anyways. And then when they had the rematch, Mitchell had been viewed as his number one contender for a while Tszyu was, nursing some of his injuries. And then he came back and blasted Mitchell in 3 rounds. So, yeah, I mean, Judah, Mitchell, Gonzalez, I mean, those are good wins, but they're not great. They're really not that close to great.
All right, so would you agree with me if you're ranking guys 1, 2 in this division, one way or the other, this is going to be Chavez Pryor, or do you disagree?
Well, that's tough too, because when you look at Aaron Pryor, I mean, do you really put the weight of an old Cervantes and a faded Alexis Arguello and the rest of the bunch above?
I don't think Alexis Arguello was faded when they fought.
Well, but he
was faded the second time, but the first time, I mean, he defended the title. He dominated Jim Watt. He had knocked out and stopped Ray Mancini, who was a young, tough fighter, and that was, I think, within a year of when he fought Pryor.
Right. Well, see, but this is my thing, and I know I've talked about this before, but for Arguello, maybe people didn't have this perception that Arguello was on the way out. But again, back to a point that I make frequently is Arguello was at his best, probably what he was at, 126, 135?
Probably 126, actually.
Yeah. So and that was actually the project that I was doing the other night, where the International Boxing Research Organization, they're redoing their all-time rankings, and I noticed that Arguello gets a lot of love when it comes to 126. So to me,
fights against Escalera, I mean, that was his best. But I still think this. I think Alexis Arguello is an all-time great fighter. And still, to beat him and to beat him in that great of a fight, it's hard to ignore. And my question to you is this then. Is it a bigger deal to beat Alexis Arguello, or is it a bigger deal to get dominated by Meldrick Taylor and to get a gift stoppage at the end of the fight?
Um, well, I mean, I'd have to rewatch the
Hey,
Chavez Taylor fight
look,
because,
if you watch Taylor Chavez, I shit you not, I thought that Taylor won almost every round, and I think this: if Don King would have been in Meldrick Taylor's corner and somebody else in Chavez's, I don't think that fight ever gets stopped, because I think most referees know how much time's left in a round, and I don't think too many of them would have stopped that fight.
yeah, and I don't actually think Taylor was that bad on his feet. I mean, I know a lot of people disagree
I
with me
think
in
he
the
was
body.
bad, but the fact that there's 2 seconds left, I think he's going to survive that.
Yeah, well, and to me, he seemed aware enough to keep going. And that's the thing is a lot of people, you watch the Legendary Knights documentary and you're like, oh, well, he was looking at his corner and his corner screaming at him and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, well, to me, he still looked good enough to, go. I mean, I don't know. I was just
Well,
of the
see, there's a
opinion.
case to be made there that Lou Duva jumps in the ring before it's even stopped and should have been disqualified then, too.
Yeah, well,
So,
yeah.
when you look at Pryor, though, the problem is this. I don't think you can rank him number one. I would love to rank him number one. I think if he fights Chavez, I think he'd have beat Chavez. But I don't think he did what Chavez did. Dwayne Johnson was a great win. It was a great fight. I think Johnson was a good fighter. Outside of that, Miguel Montilla was a solid guy. Akio Kameda, not really. And Kameda knocks him down. Gaetan Hart was not a great fighter. Sang Hyun Kim, which would have been on this day, was a 41-3 guy. That most of his fights were in his hometown. You look at Arguello, he beats him in September. After that, he fought Nicky Furlano in 1984, I think, and then Gary Hinton. And that was basically the end of his career. In the Furlano fight, Nicky Furlano, 2 years before that, he gets blasted within 5 rounds against the prime Pryor. And Gary Hinton, I think Gary Hinton beat Aaron Pryor. So Aaron Pryor is not ranked number one, and I believe that it's all Aaron Pryor's fault.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in the Kim fight, like you said, that was going to be on this day, and I was watching that fight again, because I'd already seen all of Aaron Pryor's career. I did kind of like I did the Pernell Whitaker thing, where I was like, well, a lot of people, claim this guy was, scary enough for Sugar Ray Leonard to duck him and whatnot, and I was like, so,
No.
I'm going to see. No, hell no, he wasn't. But the Kim fight,
He would have been a challenge for Sugar Ray Leonard. But I really think that Aaron Pryor was a guy that if he'd have went to 147 would not have carried the weight well. I think he was more of a guy that probably should have been a lightweight than anything else, especially in an 8 division,
yeah.
setting.
Yeah, I think he could have done pretty damn well in a setting like that. I mean, you look at the era that followed afterwards, and I think Pryor would have been, just fine, just staying at 135. But of course, he was ranked at 135
But this is
pounds
the
even
thing: if he
after.
stayed at 135, he may have been able to fight Arguello at 135. But on top of that, I mean, you had one of the biggest super fights of the 80s would have been him and Ray Boom Boom Mancini if he could have just kept his nose clean.
Yeah, that would have been a hell of a scrap.
Oh, that would have been a hell of a scrap. A Pryor would have stopped him on cuts in about 4 or 5 rounds, but it would have looked like Hagler Hearns because Ray Mancini is a guy that I think is vastly underrated for what he was. And maybe we'll do the lightweights one night. We'll bring him up. We won't bring him up in the top 10, but he'll be an afterthought. It'll be a damn good afterthought.
Yeah. So that means you have Chavez one. Is that
Well,
how it?
I think he has to be. He beats Meldrick Taylor, but the other one that stood out to me there was this: is just he beat Hector Camacho. Camacho was 40-1 at the time. Camacho was a damn good fighter, so I think Taylor took him to another level, and then he dominated Hector Camacho, and I think he beat Roger Mayweather the second time at that weight too in a solid 10-round fight. I think did he lose the junior welterweight belt to Frankie Randall?
Yes. Yep. That's
Okay.
when his reign ended.
Yeah, and Frankie Randall was a good fighter, but I just think when beating Meldrick Taylor and Hector Camacho is better than just beating Alexis Arguello. And like I said, the question is this: if you put those two styles in the ring, does Pryor beat Chavez? Because I think that would have been an extremely interesting fight. I think it would have been a great fight.
Yeah, no, I think that would have been potentially all-time great fight. I mean,
Yeah,
hell, those
and
styles.
I think the problem there is this: you watched all Pryor's career, and he gave you so many angles, and he was so quick, and he was hard to hurt. That I think that Meldrick Taylor was a different fighter than Aaron Pryor, but the hand speed and everything was similar. And we saw it with Pernell Whitaker, too, with the hand speed and the ability to give angles. And Chavez didn't fight that real well, and he didn't fight it real well against Taylor. He hit Taylor enough, and he hit him hard enough and in the right spots to slow him down so he could get the gift at the end of the fight. But I think Aaron Pryor beats Chavez, but I think Chavez deserves to be number one here.
Well, I don't know. That's tough for me because
you can't say I don't know. You got to pick somebody.
Well, if I have to pick, if we think that Pryor beats Chavez and there's not too much to separate their resumes, then I'd probably pick Pryor there.
Yeah, but I think that the 40-1 Hector Camacho separates it when you put it with Meldrick Taylor, and it also strikes me that Aaron Pryor, I mean, just longevity's got to mean something. And what it means to me is this. It's kind of like my case with Mike Tyson, that his prime was 3 or 4 years. It wasn't longer than that because of himself. So when I say I think Pryor would have won, I don't know that for sure, because my question is, during the Arguello fight, it looked like he was willing to die to win that fight. But after the Arguello fight, it didn't look like that so much. It looked like he was happy. He was happy with what he achieved. My question is, mentally, if he'd have fought Chavez, could he have broken Chavez's will? He broke Arguello's will. I think it would have been a lot harder to break Chavez's will because Chavez at Junior Welterweight was still, I think, in his prime until you get the end of that reign. Where Arguello, as you said, was a 126-pounder. And it took 14 rounds for Pryor to break Arguello's will. Now, Arguello has, an unbelievable will. He was willing to die in the ring that night. But when I watch him fight, I just think Chavez, overall, everything he did at that weight, I think he has to be number one. Now, if they fought, I'd cheer for Aaron Pryor. So this is me. I'm being honest as I possibly can. I liked Pryor as a fighter. I'm 20 minutes from Cincinnati, so everything I cheer for is from Cincinnati. So I'd have been cheering for him. But honestly, when I look at this, I just think the resume is more on Chavez's side. It's just like this, Jeremiah. If we were picking the top 10 heavyweights, does anybody really think that a Jack Johnson could have dealt with a Vitaly Klitschko or a George Foreman?
Yeah.
Especially like Vitaly Klitschko or even Vladimir Klitschko. They're probably just too big and would have beat him. But Vladimir Klitschko, even though he had a really long reign, him and Johnson are about the same anyways because they didn't fight much of anybody, so it's probably a bad example. But you know what I'm saying. I mean,
I think there's more depth for Chavez.
Yeah, because the other thing is this. I mean, in all sports, Super Bowl 42, the New England Patriots, were clearly a better team than the New York Giants. But the problem was the New York Giants' strength was the Patriots' weakness, which was the Patriots' offensive line was average. The Giants' defensive line was as good as anybody has ever seen, and that's what they beat them with. The Patriots were the greater team, but when they played each other, the Giants won because of matchups. And, there's a case to be made. The Giants were probably the fifth best team in the NFL that year. But their strength played against the 49ers' weakness, which was the offensive line in a championship game, and it played against the weakness of the Patriots' offensive line in a Super Bowl. So I just think that Chavez's run was much longer. And the thing that worries me when I say that Pryor would have won is just mentally, there has to be a lot of questions about Pryor, from the black bottle to the things he did after he beat Arguello the first time. He just wasn't a guy that was completely committed. And I think that even though I think Pryor's style beats Chavez, I still wonder what happens if they fight, especially if it's a 15-round fight, and if Chavez would have just broken his will the way he did Meldrick Taylor.
Yeah, it would have been real interesting to see Aaron Pryor fight a a really good body puncher like Chavez, because I mean, again, I saw everything that he was in, and he really didn't fight anybody like that.
No.
There's no real styles comparison that I can think of. I mean, Dewan Johnson, the guy you talked about. I mean, to me, Johnson, he was a crunk guy. You know, he was like
he was just a puncher.
Well, he was like a poor man's Tommy Hearns.
Yeah, he was just a big puncher, and he hurt Pryor. I think knocked Pryor down in that fight. And I mean, Johnson was a tough dude, because what crunk guy's not a tough dude? But in the end, that was basically all he was fighting, so you never really got to see the test. So the only thing I go with Pryor beating Chavez is the old, well, my eyes tell me that I think that would have happened. But deep down in my heart, even though I said that, I really liked Aaron Pryor. He was one of my favorite fighters. Truth be told, if you gave me $1 million and said you had to bet it on one of these guys when they fought, I'd probably put the money on Chavez.
Okay, so I have a quick question then, just kind of as a change-up. So if Meldrick Taylor had been given the win against Chavez, which he would have deserved, and we view him as one of the best 140-pounders ever, how do you think he matches up against Aaron Pryor?
To Meldrick Taylor before Chavez broke him, I think Taylor might have been technically too good for Pryor. I mean, Meldrick Taylor was an Olympic gold medalist. He was a damn good fighter, and he beat Buddy McGirt, who technically was a hell of a fighter. And he dominated Chavez for. I think he won at least, literally. My opinion is he won 9 rounds against Chavez, at least 8. And when I look at it, I just think it was one of them fights where Chavez, he left everything in the ring that night, and he had nothing left after that. But I think Meldrick Taylor in his prime against Aaron Pryor, it's a toss-up, but Taylor had more skill. I think Pryor was stronger.
Okay. So what, you think Taylor gets a decision there, or you think Pryor stops him late?
Is it a 12-round fight or a 15-round fight?
Either way. So you think in a 15, Pryor eventually catches up to him, but in a 12, Taylor gets a decision?
I don't know, because my problem is
it's tough.
Also, because if you've watched all Pryor's career, he never fought a pure boxer. The closest thing he got to fighting a pure boxer was probably Gary Hinton, and I thought Gary Hinton beat him. And Gary Hinton was nowhere near Meldrick Taylor, because most of the guys Pryor fought, we were scared to death of him, or they were just bangers hoping to hit him and get lucky. So it's hard to make a judgment. It's easier for me to make a judgment on Pryor Chavez, because he fought guys similar to Chavez. There's nobody there that is similar that he fought that I can remember to Meldrick Taylor. Meldrick Taylor was a special fighter, and it just... Some guys can be in wars for 20 years and continue to do it, like Bernard Hopkins. Well, he was never in a war, but you know what I mean. Yaki Lopez could be in 15 years of wars and never slurs his speech, and he's 70 years old and he's fine. A guy like Meldrick Taylor gets in one war with the wrong guy on the wrong night, and that's it. You never know when you're done. So I think Meldrick Taylor was the better fighter. I just don't know if he could have dealt with Pryor's speed and aggression, but I would tend to believe he probably could.
Yeah, I think so what about and I know we're running some time up here, but what about
the interesting fight would be Lochi against Pryor.
Well, what about Benitez versus Pryor?
Actually, at 140?
Yep.
I don't know. Benitez slick as shit.
Yeah, slick as fucking a needle in an oil slick.
Yeah, I mean, he was slick as shit. But I go back to this. I'm not real sure that he even beat Carlos Palomino. I know that was at welterweight. I think that Pryor would have been too much. I think Pryor could have overwhelmed him. I really do. I don't know that Benitez hit hard enough. See, I think Meldrick Taylor hit hard enough to get somebody's respect, Aaron Pryor's. Now, Pryor still walks through every damn thing. But remember this, Arguello, even though he walked through it, Arguello was a solid puncher, but Arguello was not as good a puncher at 135 even as he was 126. So what makes you think that he's that great a puncher at 147? I don't think Benitez hit hard enough. I don't think Benitez could have held him off for an entire fight. I think Pryor eventually gets to him.
Okay. So if we're breaking this down, we got Chavez 1, Pryor 2, somebody like what, Berg or
I would say
Canzoneri
Barney
3.
Ross 3, just because he beat Canzoneri twice, and I think he also beat like Billy Petrola too.
Yeah, that might be right. I know even Canzoneri's losses to Ross. I think the first one was a majority decision, and the one was a split decision. So maybe it's worth reviewing the newspaper
Well,
clippings and seeing
you
how
can
that was.
actually, I think, find a film of one of the fights, but it's one of them where they only show like a minute of the rounds, if you know what I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
But I'm pretty sure there's some Ross Canzon. I know I've seen film of Canzoneri. I just can't believe I can't remember who the hell it was against. But
Yeah,
it might have been against Ross.
well, I know I think they have a few fights on there. I know they have his knockout, his third round knockout over Jackie Berg on there, and that was a pretty stunning punch. So we'd probably have guys like Ross, Canzoneri, and Berg in there, and then probably Tszyu or Lochi, and then Cervantes.
Yeah, I would put Loche ahead of Tszyu, I think. I
Okay.
mean, just for the dominant win over Cervantes, the draw against Carlos Ortiz, yeah, I think I would put Lochi there, and then I would go somebody like probably Hatton, then Meldrick Taylor and Benitez.
Okay.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't think that's too bad. Maybe somebody like Eddie Perkins down there, or I'd have to look at Tippy Larkin's resume, or maybe even Billy Patrol. I mean, Billy Patrol had again, he had a good number of fights at the weight, so.
Yeah, but with Billy Patrol, I don't remember much about him except most of the times I read his name, it was because he lost the fight, but it was usually to a great fighter. So.
Yeah, he did beat some great ones, though.
Yeah, but he lost a lot to great ones too. Which there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like he's Deontay Wilder, but didn't Patrol like 78-20 or 78-25, something like that?
Yeah, I think it was more like 88 and like 15 or something.
Okay.
But I know he did beat a guy like Jimmy McLaurin. Actually, he was able to outmuscle Jimmy McLaurin, and because I wrote an article on Jimmy McLaurin. But yeah, he was able to outmuscle McLaurin in the first fight, and then McLaurin kind of switched up his tactics and chose to be a boxer after that. But
yeah, but didn't Petrola beat him in the third fight? Wasn't there a third fight?
I don't think so.
Because I know they fought at Yankee Stadium and he beat McLaurin like in the early 30s. I don't remember how many times they fought. Or no, wait. Let's see. He lost the last. They fought 3 times, didn't they? And McLaurin won the last 2.
That could be it. I know they fought at least twice.
I think they fought 3 times, and I think the Petrola won the first fight and McLaurin won the last 2, but I'm not 100% sure. Well, screw it. How many people are looking at BoxRec right now? I'm 100% sure. We'll just go with that. Y'all can look it up.
Yep.
If I'm wrong, you send me a message about it. But and how many times did he fight Canzoneri?
Yeah, so he fought Patrol 3 times, and he beat him the last 2.
That's what I just said, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, so you're right. I'm just verifying. So Patrol was 88, 21, and 10.
Yeah, because Patrol, I think, also beat Canzoneri. I don't remember. Did he fight Canzoneri more than once, though?
Okay, so let's see. He fights Jackie Kickberg at least twice so far, has a draw, has a victory. Let's see who else he beat. And Patrol had 65 knockouts. He loses. So he beat Canzoneri in the first fight, lost to Berg. So he's 1-1-1 against Berg, 1-0 against Canzoneri. Okay, he's 1-0 against McLaurin.
I think he fought
so
Ross
he's 1-1 against
Canzoneri both towards the end of his career again, and I think one of those 2 guys was the last fight he ever had, even.
Yeah, so it looks like so far I see that he's 1-2 against McLaurin. He's 1-1 against Canzoneri. He's 0-1 against Barney Ross. So he's 0-2 against Barney Ross. So it looks like he was 1-1 against Canzoneri, 1-2 against McLaurin, 0-2 against Ross.
Yeah, but
and it looks like he's 1-1-1 against Berg.
The 2 fights against Ross were at the end of his career, weren't they? Or close to it?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, so we give him a pass on that. I think Ross was still pretty good in 1934, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. Hey, rock solid resume though.
Yeah, he's a damn good fighter. Is he in the Hall of Fame?
Yes. Yep.
Can't believe they let him in. What? They haven't let Chris John yet in. If Chris John's not in, nobody should be. All right. You got anything else, Jeremiah?
Nah, I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, I thank everybody that listened to this tonight. Hopefully we did not bore you. And hopefully something will happen in the world of boxing tomorrow, and we'll have something to talk about tomorrow night. If not, we'll be more prepared for a night when nothing happens in boxing, and we'll be more prepared. But, of course, I was completely prepared. I apologize for Jeremiah. All right, guys. And
Thanks,
if you have any questions, you want to be a guest on the show, contact Jeremiah at TGTN Boxing on Twitter. Make sure you check out Survive in Advance with me and Steve Rilsey tomorrow. The Sheridan Report, all the top plays for tomorrow with me and Bobby Sheridan at approximately 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And then tomorrow night, me and Jeremiah will be back at 11 o'clock Eastern for Inside Boxing Daily. I want to thank everybody that listened to the show tonight, and we hope to see you guys tomorrow night. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts. You'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.